Welcome to the Middle of the Meal podcast with your hosts, The Sandwich and.
The worm. I feel like this one already, we're off to, it's going to be a long night kind of vibes. Because
It
what is it for you?
is 12:35 a.m. on Friday evening, and we're recording a podcast.
Not to brag, it's 11:30 for me. So I think the
All right,
nature of me recording the podcast now is a little different from you.
all right. No, I get it. I get it, right? I'm just thinking, what an interesting uh thing that we've chosen to fill our time with, right? I
I
mean,
mean, podcast bros. Now where I thought I'd be 11 years ago.
this is true. This is
Like
true.
it's an interesting venture because what is podcasting known for? Joe Rogan?
Right. Well, Joe Rogan, Magnificent Others, and now Middle of the Meal. I mean, that's a
Is
pretty
is that
wide
is that your is
spread.
that your Mount Rushmore?
I love that actually.
I
But
think
yes,
uh I think there's an issue with your Rushmore. I don't think many people throw Magnificent Others as top two podcast. Some put it
but
as one. Some put it as one.
yes,
Me being included is my favorite podcast because
is
it's
it
where we get our
though?
inspiration from.
This is true. This is true. And I, once again, as we do every episode, would like to personally invite Billy Corgan onto the Middle of the Meal podcast, if he does happen to see this. But
As more of an endorsement towards him, not us.
right, exactly.
Because we know as you have once crowned yourself the Billy C of the Southeast.
Have I done this?
I in passing
It's not something I've
conversation,
said.
in passing conversation,
I mean, if you say so, you know.
and that comes with a lot of baggage, maybe for some bald-headed individuals. I mean, by bald-headed individuals, I mean you and Billy Corgan. I feel like that also might be a point of contention.
Um,
If you could save yourself, you'd save us all.
oh, is that what we're getting to? I forgot we're actually not talking about the big BC on this
Not this time
podcast.
around.
No, we're talking about the infamous Ween.
The
Um,
infamous Ween. I do
right.
believe it is a little more infamous than what we've talked about in the past.
Perhaps I think maybe this is so far the furthest niche that we've gone into. But I do think that they're gaining a decent amount of popularity with Gen Z. Or maybe I'm just on that side of TikTok. You know, I do see them a lot on Instagram. The more recent venture.
From my knowledge of it, they do seem to have an older fan base because I think they're more of a cult following kind of band. I don't think they like in their career they stopped making albums in the 2000s. I don't think they ever reached a Tool or Alice in Chains level of being just an iconic moment in those genres like progressive metal or grunge. I don't think they have that cultural iconography attached.
And this is true, but I've also seen there's quite a few artists who really put them on a pedestal. Or they're
They're
definitely
known.
very appreciative. Yes, they're very
They're known.
appreciative of the sound that they create, I think, which is very interesting. Because I personally hate Ween. I hate Ween. No, not really. But I was very um, skeptical of the satirical nature of the music that they create. I think I was very skeptical initially, and it wasn't until my probably third or fourth re-listen of Quebec, uh, where I found myself actually appreciating the more like spiritual aspects of some of their songs.
I think that is the nature of this band that to me makes it so interesting because you could listen. I think there are so many songs that could be your first one. I think they would give some songs would give you totally different impressions of this band versus maybe something like Tool. I think it doesn't matter as much if you listen to Stinkfist or The Grudge first. I think both can definitely give you the general idea of what that band is about.
No, that's true. Yeah, their top hits are definitely more cohesive. I think like the examples that you gave are definitely examples of more cohesive bands, whereas I think Ween is definitely across like a wider spectrum. And I think one of the things I told you earlier was they have a sound that I've genuinely never heard before. Like it's very unique, and even in under the alternative label, it's not. I don't think it's something that I've heard done by anybody else in any sense.
The word I would use, I think, that may be the best fitting is eclectic,
Okay.
as in
Yeah.
just in a variety of sounds is the descriptor. Like that is just the descriptor to use.
And that's true. And we can even like from there we can just go into talking about the first track on Quebec because I think that is probably the most tradition I think the most traditional rock song that you're going to find on that album is It's Gonna Be a Long Night. And a very interesting way to open that album too, I think, because it's very high energy. I also feel it's not I think the topic being covered in that song is not inherently unique. Uh but I think it is a good display of what Ween can do, you know.
Correct, in the sense the second track is a complete 180 on the vibe and subject matter.
Yeah, it's right. It's very interesting in that sense. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it being a complete 180, because I think both topics in like the topics in both Zoloft and It's Gonna Be a Long Night. For one, they're both referencing drug use in some way, but two, I think both are more a materialistic approach. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like,
In the react, I think in the reactive nature, I think I would agree. I think they're both
mhm,
very reactive songs, two physical things.
right, yeah. Do either of these songs though really stick out to you when you're looking at this album? Like, to me, Zoloft is a pretty forgettable song, and again, I think the opener on this album is interesting, but it's not really something that sticks out to me. Besides maybe like these two songs in comparison to the rest of the songs that you find on the album, because there is so much diversity in this album that I would argue can kind of be overwhelming.
I think my relationship with this band and how I listen to their albums is just different from yours because I've listened to every single one of their albums.
Right. Oh, you're calling me a
And
poser. Yeah.
this is that is what it would be in layman's terms. I did choose to be a little nice there. But yes,
Okay. Okay.
Ween poser, if that is a thing people are choosing to be now. I don't know why anyone would choose to do this. I mean, look at these guys. I don't know. I don't know who, and it's more so of that thing. For someone who's listened to all their albums, I think I can say this is one of the more cohesive ones
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
because this band's entire nature, I think I'll say all of it is eclectic.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, It's Gonna Be a Long Night is maybe a more tame Ween affair than anything from their first three albums. So looking at it from that perspective, It's Gonna Be a Long Night and Zoloft maybe aren't as jarring for me as someone who's seen more of what they can do. To me, it's a little more tame. And production wise, I would say yeah, for sure it's gonna be a long night. It's definitely the more basic kind of rock track. Zoloft though, I think is a very interesting ambient song because it doesn't do what most typical ambient songs do. In the middle of the song, there's like a helicopter noise.
Right. Yep.
Like I don't think that's necessarily typical of ambience, which is what makes me remember a song like Zoloft. Is maybe the more unique Ween choices in production, like sound effects definitely being a core of it. I think the instrumentation is very lo-fi on Zoloft. Yes, I don't think I really remember the riff in the song. It's very simple. But the grander ambience it creates with the story it's telling, I think that's just, to me, it's so unique that I can accept it as a part of this album. As it holds a place with the other songs on this album being, yes, different, but also, I think, unique within themselves.
I think I do want to come back to the helicopter piece because I think that with Transdermal Celebration being the next song on this album, I may have an opinion on why that helicopter sound is in that song. But one of the things I do want to talk about on Zoloft, and really this is more so a personal opinion of mine on the vocals throughout Ween in general, but definitely like one of the more jarring aspects of Ween for me is how they approach the vocals. Like during that one piece where he's like, don't
This
disguise the nature of your soul." Like just the
is like
high
a
pitch,
completely
like
different voice than the rest of the song.
yeah, yeah. Whereas I feel like without that, I could maybe, and maybe the point is to jar you out of this lull. But without that, I could definitely enter a lull with the song. But yeah, with those vocals, I just can't. Like,
Okay.
it's just not
Yeah.
possible for me.
And again, I think that comes back to my point before as someone who is just, I think, more so has understood that this has become one of my favorite bands, I think,
Hmm.
relatively quickly. And as a band, I is just in the nature of what they do. And I think personally, in the realm of vocal effects, I think in the realm of vocal effects, they do it pretty well. Because I feel there's no other band that I feel could write these lyrics. Maybe something like Tried and True is a better example. I don't think I could ever see a band use that vocal effect positively because it is jarring. It is jarring, but I think the lyrics and the instrumentation feel sincere to the point that I can accept they're using the vocal effect to have like a personal laugh because I don't think it
Right.
changes the nature of the instrumentation or the message that's being taken across, other than the fact it makes it seem more sincere and manicured in a way to seem that way because imagine a Smashing Pumpkins song with vocal effects. I just don't think that works.
That's true. And I think it's interesting bringing up Billy Corgan because I think he gets a lot of I think he gets a lot of flack in the alternative community for his vocals. I think a lot of people don't like his vocals. They think he sounds very whiny, a little too high pitched. And I guess it really does like that's why I was a little hesitant to bring it up because I think it's all just personal preference. To me specifically, it was just a little jarring listening to it the first time. And I this is something I guess we'll talk about later. I know it's not a concept album, but with how well this album is written otherwise, I think it's a little jarring to me in the sense that it almost feels like a concept album, and to have these jarring pieces can be, or these jarring vocals can be a little bit confusing. However, I also understand that that confusion is uh, part of what makes Ween's following so appreciative of their music. You know, I think it's a very interesting case in this band where something that I might find to be a negative, somebody who's really into Ween is going to find to be a positive.
Right. That's why I think the Billy Corgan in comparison is is fair because I think that's something that maybe we more mutually agree on, that the vocals aren't a turnoff for us with the music. Is that truly just subjective? I think it is. Because I really don't think pre-Machina Billy Corgan vocals are a huge attractor for me in any way. I think the authenticity of this just truly being a guy who's maybe not the most vocal trained, singing his songs, I think just speaks to the nature of the music more than anything. And is that a
You think it's more
subjective
like
thing to maybe
raw,
choose to say?
right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I'd choose the word raw because it's shining a light that most people, when faced with with these critiques, might choose to use autotune, right?
True. True.
So even if this is a subjective conversation, I think I can still get something out of them using what they want to do, even if it's not universally accepted. I think that counts for something in the music world.
Yeah, I do appreciate the authenticity aspect of it. I think that's very fair. Yeah.
But then if we talk about it being jarring, I think it's the exact same thing as it is fair for it to be jarring. Because you know what?
Yes. Yeah.
I think that probably is the point with a band like this.
With some of these songs,
Because they don't
yes.
have to do it.
Yeah.
They don't have to.
Mm-mm.
And that's why watching videos of them live is very interesting because they'll play songs like Tried and True or even Zoloft, and they have the vocal mask is gone. It is just their voices. But I feel like to me, it hits somewhat the same. Like to me, it's just a part of the Ween production when it's on an album.
Right. Right. I
It's
guess
just the way they choose to do things.
um another song that I in this album that I think is really jarring, but I would say is more intentionally jarring is So Many People in the Neighborhood. Um it's a very interesting song like when you get into the part where uh or not just like the main vocals of the song, not like the So Many People in the Neighborhood, but like where he's talking about the pie and whatever the hell else. The tension that's building in that song, it's interesting because when I was listening to it, it made me like uncomfortable, and I thought that was really interesting. Like, I think it's rare that I listen to a song and I'm thinking about it, and it elicits an emotion other than like sadness or happiness. It's very rare for me to feel like actually uncomfortable when listening to a song. Again, goes to I think the uniqueness of this band. That's not an experience that I feel very often when listening to music.
Yes, I think I can agree with you there. And definitely when I was first listening, in the context of this band, there's the term brown, which they throw onto songs. In this album, I think songs that would be considered brown are things like Happy Colored Marbles, So Many People in the Neighborhood, The Fucked Jam. It's like outside of the concept of this band, I could not see another album having something like The Fucked Jam in it.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I think may be an interesting choice for an album, again, that maybe could have been a concept album to include. But when it's Ween, it is just something of their nature to have sillier and weirder inclusions in the album because I think it is a part of the charm, I think, too, because most people would feel that uncomfortable nature when listening to So Many People in the Neighborhood and maybe not listen to the rest of the album.
Ah, maybe. Yeah. I get what you mean with that.
Like it's not something I think most people can just pick up as like I throw a recommendation without explaining more about what this band is and then maybe trying to attach it to the personal connection bit because I think that's the only way really with some emotional appeals that it can be more thoroughly understood because it's weird. There's a lyric and he's going ding dong like a good friend of
Right.
ours, but it's like you don't expect that in a song.
Sure.
Songs are
Yeah.
usually verse chorus verse, it explodes to like this voice talking about so many people in the neighborhood. Like it's not typical. It just
No,
isn't.
that's true. It's definitely a progressive song.
So like
Interesting.
not the way we would attribute progression in music.
Oh yeah, definitely not. However, it does still like, at least to me, one of the important parts of a progressive song. And I'm not trying to throw too much back to the Fear Inoculum episode we did, because we had a lot of disagreements on that one. However, I think being able to extract an emotion out of me, if if a progressive song can do that, I think it's a very well made progressive song, and I think that's an important aspect of a progressive song, is how you're extracting this emotion from me. And that's why even though so many people in the neighborhood is definitely far from uh my favorite song on this album, I think I was very impressed by how it did that, and like how uncomfortable, not like, just the level of uncomfortability I felt, I think was very interesting.
Which
I
is,
was
I
able to
would say,
place
probably
myself in
unique
this
for music.
position. Yes, definitely.
Music is this thing that is turned on, you're listening to, and you're like, typically you're in the vibe. But so
Right.
many people in the neighborhood or something like Happy Colored Marbles isn't a 3 a.m. affair, even for me, I think.
Mm-mm. No.
Because what am I really doing sitting in a dark room listening to a guy going, so many people in the like over or
Right.
repetitive, like just, it's repetitive too.
No, it is.
And but that's a
Yes.
part of the progression. It's part of the progression.
Mhm. Yeah, repetitiveness is a tool that's used very well in that song, I think. But I guess leaving the realm of some of the weirder aspects of this album, we can go back to Transdermal Celebration, which I think is a very beautiful song, definitely. Even though the topic being covered in that song is very interesting, you know. Um, yeah, I think there are aspects of it that are more of like a euphoric um celebration of yourself, which is something that I think is also covered in Tried and True. Uh, but like there's a story being told in Transdermal Celebration, which goes back to the song before it, Zoloft. It seems the reason I mentioned the helicopter is um, there's almost like
Yeah.
a military aspect to this song, to
A
Transdermal
plane taking
Celebration.
off.
Yes, yes, like they're like, I think there's a lot going on between these two songs. Like Zoloft is the hidden aspect of what's going on. Transdermal Celebration is we've evolved past these things. Um, and even though these bad things have happened, have evolved beyond them, and we have become okay with the results of these actions, you know. But it's being conveyed through this idea of like a a military action, you know. That's the like the crustaceans falling from the jets, I think, is one of the imagery pieces that's used in this song.
Yes. And I definitely think of watching this transpire of the line a million miles to Marquet
Hmm.
is also a change in tone that seems like the narrator is just stopping for a second and watching all of this happen. And I think with just the greater theme of transformation, I think the solo in the middle of the song is very beautiful in that way because it, to me, that one is particularly special because it starts with the guitar hook and then the solo goes on for 30 minutes like it's ascending. It's a very bright color that I imagine when I listen to this song, particularly when the solo begins.
Right. Yeah. I do like that solo. It's a very pretty solo. And yeah, I think the imagery used, this song definitely paints a picture for me. I definitely see a lot of bright colors, and the aspect that you're talking about where a million miles to Marquet, I think it's interesting because I do see this like this pausing in this song, like this stop to think moment, which again, goes to like the progressiveness of some of these songs. I don't think that that's something that you see in music very often, but I think it's a very important piece of the song. This would be a very different song if it didn't have that moment in it.
And that is because I did think another part of Ween, I think it tends to be very self-referential in its lyrics because you can have a moment like A Million Miles from Marquet, lay on the lawn, he's already home when the morning ray hits his face is like a moment of serenity. And
Hmm.
then the song goes on talking about crustaceans falling out of a plane. I think that's
Right.
very hard. It's very hard to sincerely still have your message across when the word choices you use are absurd on the face of it. Because I think
Right.
for a lot of people, the nature of this song going from a serious moment to jets flying overhead dropping crabs is a hard feat to do. If Billy
That's
Corgan took
very
a crack at
true.
this kind of lyricism, I don't think that can be pulled off, and that's with thinking that Billy Corgan is a good lyricist. I don't think it's an act that everyone can do so simply.
That's true. Yeah.
Because I think
And
you can get lost in the absurdity.
I think it is good some of the imagery that they used here, like especially at the beginning of the song, because I think that it's taking what would be a much more serious issue. Like just reading some of the lyrics here, we're talking about, you know, toppling down a nation, left people running for the hills, you know, a tectonic tribulation. We're talking about we talked about like this seems like some sort of military action, but this seems like a very I would otherwise attribute this to be like a very dramatic action and something potentially even catastrophic. But in using these very specific word choices, it makes it seem a little more like flowery almost. And
It paints a picture and an interesting picture because of we're really truly seeing how the narrator feels about what are in our eyes potentially just dark events of what I think is transpiring here is maybe like nukes being dropped with just the
yeah,
concept of
exactly.
mutation.
Yes,
But the
yes.
narrator's view on these mutants is that he wishes he could see them because he thinks that they could be beautiful. I think that's not normal. Like, right? That's not a normal
No.
reaction that anyone would have to this.
Mm-mm.
And then that leads to the question, how does someone write a song about nuclear warfare and have that guitar solo in the middle of it that's this uplifting piece?
Yeah, how do you make it sound so beautiful and idealize it almost? How do I walk away from this song and I'm like, I almost like want it to happen. Like this is such a beautiful song. I do love the idea of like this euphoria that comes after these events in this song, you know? Like it's almost a scary maybe that's part of the idea that's being portrayed here. You know, like it's I think it's scary almost that you can do that with a topic like this, you know? But it does I guess it would it the idea levels the playing field a little bit more, right? It's something that you don't really cover a lot, especially in rock and metal music, especially, you know, well, rock
I
music
think
especially.
I think this the topic of destruction is is typically in metal, particularly part of the idol of rebellion.
Hmm.
But I think this is the same in a less angsty way. Because I think this is also a rebellion in the sense of just going away from the norm that what if this change is beautiful, you know? Transdermal celebration is not a name that I think a song about an apocalypse would be in a metal album.
And
So I think
this,
that's interesting.
we've talked about before how I think some of my favorite songs are the ones that cover this concept of allowing things to change you. And it's why I really do like this song, I think, is because it's, allowing these, or not really having control over these events that are transpiring, but instead of letting them destroy you, you're letting them change you. You know, like he talks about further like growing with the land, you know. And to that, I do think it's really beautiful in that sense, is taking these bad events or these almost making these events seem like they're neutral events and really, you know, concerning yourself more so with what you do from these events.
Right. And that's so interesting in the nature of this not being a concept album, that the next track is Among His Tribe, which I think takes a slightly different approach to the nature of change. That change is a good thing. In a sense, they both describe the same thing, but I think Among His Tribe uses much more simple language, that it doesn't leave as much as an effect on me as Transdermal does.
I have a slightly different opinion. Uh, Again, it's really like I struggle with this isn't a concept album. I have to keep reminding myself that because the way that Among His Tribe is placed before so many people in the neighborhood, but after Transdermal Celebration, is difficult to me because when you listen to Among His Tribe, which almost like puts these more archaic practices on a pedestal, and you compare it to so many people in the neighborhood, which is obviously laughing at the nature of like suburbanism, it's difficult for me to not look at, you know, the actions that are being described in Among His Tribe is what the author sees as good versus uh, the modernization and these experiences that have come with modernization are what the author sees as bad. Because we know that in Transdermal Celebration, change is good somewhere, right? So I don't really know how I feel about Among His Tribe because it's almost like a direct to me. I see it as a direct conflict of Transdermal Celebration.
In that, in, okay, because yes, in the relation that the next song is so many people, yes, then I see your point there. But I think to me that slightly more so relies on that track. But I see your point on how it derails the whole thing then.
Right.
Because, well, then I think that maybe that brings up the question: do you think this should have been a true concept album? Because I do think there is an interesting concept here. For sure, there's an interesting concept here that a good amount of the songs share. That maybe if it was tied to as a whole, it would make the album better.
I feel like there's a lot of webbing between some of these songs. It's more so that I almost already perceive it as a concept album, and it's like knowing that it's not bothers me because it seems there's aspects of it that are so cohesive, and there's just these like little sprinkles of like, you know, weird out there stuff. But besides that, there are topics that are being covered, like this idea of, you know, evolution of yourself and yourself in reference to the rest of everything else that exists. Like these are important parts of the album, I think. So it's interesting for me to not look at it as a concept album because there are webbed narratives in this story or in this album, I mean.
Right. And I think maybe even more so as a greater Ween fan of their other albums, maybe I'm might be even more conflicted because this is maybe the closest they do get to a concept album in story 100%. Because in most of their albums, I feel like what's more so the key thing that's being presented is a musical identity for each of the songs being different, with the story being dramatically different. In this album, I think relatively you get closer musical musical pieces and also closer lyrical content. So I can definitely like I would say empathize with the fact like yeah, how is this not a concept album?
Right. Yeah.
And then do you think concept albums are a grander way of making a good album? Like is that naturally a good thing?
I That's a difficult question. I know that most of my favorite albums are concept albums. I would say at least half, you know. And I think that it can do one of two things, I guess. Like I can see both sides of the coin where if you have a concept album where the author or the lyricist is thinking about it as a concept album, it can either, you know, give them this great backbone that they need to work their way through the songs in the album in a way that one follows the next and follows the next and so on and so forth. But I could also see it maybe like walking the lyricist into this one idea and potentially limiting them from, other compositions that would be really good. Um, so I don't know. I guess I really don't know how to answer that question. I think me personally, I prefer concept albums more because it gives me a better box to think in almost, you know. When I look at lyrics that are a little more vague, but then I think about maybe how I can think more about how the author wanted them to be interpreted in the context of the album, you know.
Right. And then the issue I come to with Ween is that I completely agree with you, but for some reason with these guys, I can maybe even see fucked jam being a part of their concept and me not even knowing about it. Just because of the nature they make music. Maybe something like
I
the fuck
think
means
that's just
something
where we're
more.
gonna fundamentally disagree because I do not see the purpose of Fuck Jam on this
And the
album.
thing is, neither do I. Neither do I really. It's for me it's just way too long. It's I think it's nearly 3 minutes. That's a little
Just what is going on? Like
and it's
it's just
mainly due to the fact that it's
noise.
also a repetitive noise. It's not a thing that progresses. So then maybe yeah, maybe it's a little idiotic
And
to
there's
claim.
nothing. Is there I can't even remember, like I know the main riff. Is there even any instrumentation happening in the Fuck Jam? Because
I don't even think so because I think the drums are a drum machine.
I think that like I saw one of those little bits on Spotify and it was like apparently the main riff sounds a lot like a default preset setting on some music software. So that's really interesting if that's the case. If it really is just like some preset setting on a software and they somehow turned it into a song on an album. But I do think regardless it's way too long and I
Correct.
just do not see the purpose.
Correct. I think and that is one. To me, I'm glad this band would even make me second guess myself there
Right.
because I think that's one of the songs that breaks apart the concept. But then just to the nature of Ween seemingly being musicians that don't really care about how this looks. You got so many people in the neighborhood. It's the fifth track. I think a
Right.
lot of people might even turn it off there, not even get to the fuck jam being like number 12. It's something I can excuse, but also criticize at the same time on its own
Right.
because um I feel bad whoever's listening to this on vinyl. I can just skip. I can just skip, and that's maybe something you never want to do. But I think it's something you can excuse. It's something you can excuse.
Especially, I guess that's fair, especially when it's not a concept album. I can excuse skipping a song a lot more.
I think that's
knowing
true.
that skipping
I
a
think
song is
most
not like
people inherently do. Most people inherently do.
right.
When
Yeah.
listening to albums, I think it's something maybe you and me do less because of the nature of how we listen to music. I think one skip isn't an end all be all.
No. Yeah.
Sometimes you want none. Perfect is none. Perfect is none. It did perfectly
Yeah.
what it set out to do. One is one mark. And to me, when right before the fuck jam, you get something like I Don't Want It,
It's a
I
very good
think
song.
I
Yes.
think makes me feel differently on the fuck jam because I Don't Want It is to me wherever you place yourself in the song, I think it is something it's just it's something special because of how one, it displays relationships.
Hmm.
Two, it is the simple message of understanding something and processing it from there, from the notion that you understand it, even if you don't want it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I would also say, in terms of the actual composition of this song, interestingly, it's probably the least experimental on this album, I think. Um, but it's a very beautiful song, and like you said, I think it definitely does cover the the concept of understanding something and processing it very well. And I think if even though it's not the best descriptor of the band, if I was trying to get somebody into Ween, this is probably the song that I would give them. Just because I think even though it's not as experimental, it does display the their skill very well. I also really like the solo in this song. I just think it's a beautiful song. I do.
And then to the nature of the composition and the nature of the band, I think visuals also play a part here because to me, the solo starts with a refrain of the guitar lick in the beginning, to the point
Hmm.
where the narrator has understood everything he feels he needs to understand. He doesn't want it at all. But to me, the guitar solo is very cathartic in a way that it's so loud. It's so simple, but it's so loud that it is just that feeling of picking apart your emotions and just sitting there with it all. It's heavy. It's a heavy feeling. It's a heavy feeling to sit there with those things. Because that's what I think the narrator's doing. The narrator's not going anywhere. He's just sitting down.
That's true, and I like the descriptor that you use. That it's very loud. I do. Yeah, I do think that how the song was written, the way that things are placed in the song, they're placed very well, I think, and I think that you see growth within the song itself, which is very interesting, you know. And I also just think the main riff is really pretty as well. It again, it almost like from what this album is, even though the song does cover like to me it covers a little bit of like the growth of yourself, you know, and definitely like you said the understanding of something more. It was a little jarring on the album just because it is calmer. It was just not something I expected initially, I think, from in comparison to the other songs on this album.
And I think that's special. Like I think that's special to find. You have something that really makes you sit down. 2 tracks ago, we were listening to Hey There, Fancy Pants, which is, I think, the peak of the satirical nature of the songwriting. But then you listen to 2 more songs and you get to I Don't Want It.
Right, right. Oh, I guess I did want to go back to Happy Colored Marbles a little bit because I know we were talking about like the vocals on this album and how some of the vocals I didn't necessarily prefer. I think that how the vocals are done in Happy Colored Marbles, I think I actually do prefer that in terms of the context of the song, which is pretty interesting. Like I think how they did the vocals in that song was perfect in terms of the message that's trying to be conveyed. It almost sounds a little like loony, you
To
know?
me, it is like cursed nursery rhyme.
Yeah. Yes.
Mainly because the lyrics are kind of intense.
They are, yes. Yeah.
In even, I think the first line sets up the view here that most people are not okay, is the first line. And the way that maybe we put these parts of ourselves in others sometimes, I think either in the way that we see maybe it will get us better if we put these emotions onto other people, but I think it depends how one does this. I think you can very easily subversively put on your bad qualities onto other people as a ways to not address the problem properly. And I think the idea of a bag full of marbles is a very interesting choice of imagery to choose for this, because you cannot see what's inside the bag of marbles. As in, you're putting this stuff into other people, and then maybe they can't even see it before it's there.
Wow, that's really that actually like shocked me. I'm not gonna lie. I actually was not thinking about that song in this way. And that is a very interesting
Because,
description that you've just left me with. Because
and
I
I think
actually totally agree with that. And
I
that's
think I'm
very
100%
interesting.
on that, because the final lines of the nursery rhyme portion of the song carry that velvet sack of full of pretty. I think it means like pretty, like this, pretty colored marbles. And I'll ask you for 'em back when I'm ready and done, and then it's the like a demonic screeching sound.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's like, surprise, I screwed you over as well by handing over these bad qualities of myself onto you. And that's happy colored marbles, is just that deception.
Right. Yeah. Because you're absolutely right. You don't know what's in the bag. Yeah. Wow. What that's very interesting. But yeah, and that's definitely not
And
the
again,
approach
it's
that I
like
was taking
Tried
with
and
this song.
True is the song before this one. And I think
Right.
that one is all about the nature of accepting what you are on the inside and showcasing it maybe even to someone else to let them feel it as well. And I think that song displays this in a much more sincere fashion
Sure.
as
Yeah.
it to
Yeah.
this one. This one feels subversive because it's a nursery rhyme, then it's this very loud noise portion, which most definitely intentional of a subversive element.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that Happy Colored Marbles is probably the more materialistic component to Tried and True. I really like Tried and True. Um, yeah, it covers this idea of like you are the universe, I think, you know. Like you are what you make important and you are what you make yourself. And I think that that's also a topic that's not covered in music very often. Like more so this understanding your place relative to the rest of what you exist in, you know.
Which is what is tried and true. That
Hmm.
being
Yes.
yourself, I think, is what it's describing.
And the imagery in this one is also, I think, like, that is one thing. Ween definitely knows how to do imagery very well. Like, potentially I might say the best in terms of, like, how well they can paint a picture. I wouldn't say it's the most, like, beautiful imagery, but
I wouldn't say the most thorough,
yes,
but the
yeah,
most descriptive, under the
yes,
pretense of they start talking about crustaceans in the middle of the song, and it doesn't really change my view of it because it's still painting the picture, just with its own
right.
unique elements alongside it.
And perhaps that's part of why so many people love Ween is because they take these very intense moments and then they can use this imagery that makes it a little more colorful, or and by adding that color, and by color I really just mean like musical color, it's making the song itself a little less intense
and
and a little
more
more
glittery,
enjoyable.
I
Yeah, that
think.
too. Yeah.
And I think the song is so beautiful too in the way I think this is I think a even though there is a vocal effect being used here, I totally believe what this guy's saying. And I think what really sells it is the pause in the line. Oh, you can dig in my soul. Could you smell my hole? 3-second pause, then it says life. I think
Right.
that's funny. Like he's saying, could you smell like my hole? And then it's like life. It's like it plays to its own humor of this just being a good-natured song. That joke can what is a pretty relatively I think vulgar joke in most songs just flies by because it's very intentional to
Sure.
make
Yeah,
you think
for
for a
sure.
split second, but the song is still what it's about. I think that's unique too, a part of the imagery aspect. For a second there, you're tricked because this guy didn't change his tone of voice at all, making this joke about butts, and
Right.
it's a spiritual song. It's still a spiritual song at the same time. I think that is a hard feat as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And
Would you say that is that your favorite song on this album? I don't actually know.
I think I think my favorite song, which captures the same dynamics as Tried and True, is The Argus.
The Argus.
I
Okay.
think The Argus takes this very interesting concept matched with the beautiful instrumentation of Tried and True to have one of the most beautiful climaxes in a song that I think I've personally ever heard, which is the last minute of that song, starting with the guitar solo into the just very joyful instrumentation I think that is showcased at the end. When the topic of the song is, I think, such a grand question on consciousness.
Right.
I think consciousness in music as a topic is already rare, and to be done in such a musically delightful way with very energetic instrumentation, I think is also very hard to take seriously. I think it's hard to take seriously, maybe, in that sense.
That's very true. I think with some of these topics that are being covered, like part of the reason that they aren't commonly covered in songs is because of how heavy they are, maybe. And because I think it's something that's very difficult to execute without it sounding a little phony or corny. But maybe because
Correct.
when you're going into Ween, knowing that they already have this very like corny aspect to themselves naturally, it it's maybe it is a little more it's easier to take them seriously when they want to be taken seriously.
Yes. Yes.
Like it's a more subconscious effect maybe. And it's not something I'd really thought of beforehand, but I think I can see it now with how you're describing it.
Because yesterday we lost our lives, tomorrow we're born. I think that what that song sets up, I think, can really run back to a lot of the album's nature of change.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I think it, even with what it chooses to tell this story with, I think is also interesting. The Argus being this monster from Greek mythology with like 1,000 eyes, an
Hmm.
all-seeing kind of thing, and relating that back to the way our brains operate in taking all of these things, including our own spirituality, becoming a different thing when we go to sleep because it's such an active thing that we always have that it to some I think does become a fear of the nature of one's soul and where that is it shining in a good light or a bad light being such a constant thought that when we go to bed it is we dissolve into a dream state, and then I think that's maybe what this song is trying to say is the nature of life as well as the final line is, or the final lines. Well, no, the final stanza, I guess, covers this more. Swirling with visions of man's confusion, all of the work done to appease him. The Argus cries, though love has its place in the sun. It's only man fear that carries him on. I think I think these ideas of religion or spirituality are sometimes just a result of our biases, and that it is other people's reaction to them a lot of the times that cause fear is what makes this song interesting, focusing on a monster from Greek mythology with a bunch of eyes. Because what happens when those eyes close, I think, is the question at the end of the song that it leaves me with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, when you make something such an important part of yourself, and then, you no longer have that aspect, what are you really, I guess, if you remove yourself from that piece.
Right. It questions is what does fear have to do with it then? Fear of what?
Right.
Do
Right.
and
Yeah,
you
well, I
have
get what
that.
are you when you think that your eyes are your only tool to see, I guess. What do you become when your eyes are closed? It's a very
And
interesting concept.
then potentially with the line of the Argus cries, though love has place in the sun, I think that ending instrumental is a very loving piece that I do see the sun by the end of the song. So
Right.
to me, due to the instrumentation in work with the lyrics, I think that song beautifully and perfectly does what it set out to do. Because I think that song leaves me in a good place because of the instrumentation. I think the nature of this song does change with how one chooses to compose instruments alongside it.
Yeah. No, I do
So
like the end of that song. It's very climatic, I think. And I see what
right.
you mean by seeing the sun at the end of the song.
And I think to me that makes Ween so valid because I think it's a very interesting way to end a progressive song in
Right.
your way, kind of thing. Progressive songs, I think, are typically taught to be these very orchestrated affairs, very professional affairs that you feel it kind of ends. It ends after the climax. But I think for this one I think sticks with me because of that bright ending.
Right.
Like there's a subversion in the lyrics. There's a subversion in the lyrics.
Mhm.
Like when I listen to a Tool song, I think there are many Tool songs that make me feel good after listening, but I think that's more so due to the intensity of the instrumentation a lot of the times.
Right.
So it's interesting to see a softer look at a progressive song that picks apart the idea of consciousness. Is pretty interesting. It's pretty
No,
interesting.
no, definitely. Yeah. Again, speaks to the uniqueness of the band. That's not something I've ever seen any other band.
And then that song leaves you with just the notion if you could save yourself, you'd save us all. I think is a very good closer for this album.
A good closer, a good I think it is a good closer for the album. I did want to go back a little bit though to Alpin Road actually before we talked about the closer, especially when we're talking about seeing the sun at the end of the Argus. Whereas I feel Alpin Road is a very the beginning is I like the imagery here, but I almost feel it's a little dark, like the atmosphere, I mean. It's a little it feels more like a
Foggy?
void. Foggy's a
Yeah,
good,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
foggy's a
void.
good word. Yes.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot. I've heard some things of people saying this is like the aftermath transdermal celebration. And I
I could
think that
see
would add
that.
another layer to Alkin Road.
Yeah,
The narrator now in Transdermal Celebration is deeply excited by this change. The
right,
narrator in Alkin Road seems almost lost within, I think it's still establishing this nuclear fallout.
right.
And I think that's pretty interesting in the whole nature of change and that this album describes. Because Alkin Road is very mysterious.
It is very mysterious, and I hadn't thought about it potentially being connected to uh, transdermal celebration in that way. Because again, it goes back to I see the mysteriousness in this song, and then I see the more, uh, I guess, vividness of the Argus, and so I see them as connected as opposed to potentially transdermal celebration and Alpine Road being more connected, which I think makes a lot more sense now that you're saying that, because there is a lot of imagery here that paints like
Ooh.
a post-apocalyptic image,
And I
you
think
know.
something else, I guess I never really compared the lyrics to each other. These are like just uh some of the things that it mentions in the song. Mountain man, frosted child, eagle's
Hmm.
cry, pups of gold, strung like time, molded in form. Trees bend back, trails to form. I think what it's establishing there is maybe the mutants described in Transdermal Celebration and things undeniably changing. But I think the narrator is reacting to the fallout in Alkin Road, and the narrator is reacting to the sudden feeling of change in Transdermal Celebration. I do think those are different feelings. Those are
Yes.
different
Yeah.
feelings because Transdermal Celebration is a hopeful song
Yes.
because it is awaiting something that has yet to happen and can maybe be more seen in the distance. And Alkin Road is the muddy, foggy, experiencing the change firsthand.
Right.
So in that sense,
Yeah.
maybe that again, and that maybe that makes me feel a little more twisted on how is this not a concept album?
Yeah, no, exactly. That is exactly my thought is how is this not a concept? Because
Because I feel like it's once you read the lyrics, it's kind of easy to maybe put that together, and that's potentially frustrating. I think validly so.
and then if we're seeing it from this perspective that you have now, or the idea that you just introduced where, Alkin Road is when you're actually actively going through the change as opposed to just idealizing it, then maybe you could even see the Argus as being, the aftermath of allowing this experience to have changed you and what you are now, you know, and how you're um, reacquiring these ideas into your own personality, you know, like so I then potentially see maybe the purpose of why these two are close to each other potentially. It's just an idea, but
Right.
yeah, I'd never really thought of those two songs as being so connected to each other
And
before, and it
another
makes a lot
nature of
more
that,
sense now.
Falcon Road is at the end of the album, Transdermal's at the beginning. That
Right.
also, how do you feel about that? If the nature of these two seeming very connected, but one is at the beginning, one is at the end.
It's
Can you
almost
feel an
so,
album can do that?
I mean, they can, right? I think the issue is um it maybe changes the context of transdermal celebration for me because I thought transdermal celebration was a more present song, but I can see it as it being more a like an idealization of a song, like
But
we're
even then,
imagining these events that haven't
I think
happened
that can
yet.
also be good though. I think that can also be good because if the nature of change is positively described in this album, maybe it's such a euphoric moment because you want it to change for the better. And I think that's a natural feeling as well.
No, but then the issue is, how does Alpine Road play into this? Where now that we're actually going through the change, and you know, I mean, it may just be just the human bias, like you were talking to abrupt change. Obviously, things that are unclear we're going to be more hostile towards initially, but then why? That's why the placement of transdermal celebration is a little more annoying to me, because it would almost make sense to place it we've had after we've gone through the initial fog of not knowing what's going on. And once we're a little more acquainted with our surroundings, we become a little more
I
comfortable
like that.
potentially with the change.
I think that makes transdermal work better. I would
Yeah,
agree with you there. Because then that can fit into the grander, I guess, the closer connected thesis of the album of change being positive.
exactly. Yeah. But
Because
I do like the song, you know, standalone. I do like the atmosphere in this song.
yeah, outside of the idea of nuclear fallout, I can definitely just like see myself just like maybe like sitting down like a grassy kind of field and just like taking in the emptiness around me as it is just an ambient. It's an ambient piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it works pretty well in that regard.
But then I guess, yeah, moving on to the closer, you know, if you could save yourself, you could save us all.
Is I think is another song about acceptance, but in the way that you can be the only change you want to see. And I think that is still true for this song and every other song that deals with the aspect of changing. Because at the end of the day, our humanness is ourselves, and however we react to what other people may do to us or act in front of us, our reaction is what leads to whatever conclusion we want to see.
No, certainly, like we make our own reality. But I'm almost, do you think this song is talking about if you want change, you really have to do it to yourself and for yourself? Or like looking at the narrative in this song, right? I don't know. How do you perceive the narrative in this song? Because I almost perceive it as a more hostile interaction between two people, you know?
I think I perceive it as a divorce allegory almost. And I feel maybe where the inspiration of the song took place is I think Ween, who wrote the song, maybe heard and was told if you could save yourself, you'd save us all. I think that statement is important to the nature of change, regardless of, yes, I think the more hostile story that's being made. Because I think if you think you're a part of this pattern of hostility that I think is also displayed in Happy Colored Marbles, what is it another person can do for you if you are if you are just reciprocating the hostility?
Right. Yeah.
I think it leaves you with
Hmm.
more of a question. I think it leaves you with more of a question.
Right. And that is interesting because I think that brings us to like looking at the whole of this album, which is why I can maybe make the argument as to why it can't be a concept album, because I think you have multiple narratives going on here, even though you do have the overarching theme of change and allowing yourself to change and the perception of these changes. But you have the more, I would argue, materialistic side of this change and the more spiritual side, which I would attribute to songs like Uh, Transdermal Celebration, The Argus, and Tried and True. Those are probably the more spiritualistic sides where you're looking at your yourself in comparison to everything else that exists. Whereas I think like I Don't Want It and then the closer on this song are more of a local experience, like local interactions.
Correct. They're not as grand. Well, I think this song is. Well, I think the songs are both grand in their own ways. I more so mean the landscape isn't as
Yes.
huge.
Yeah.
Because I think that what this song, I think this song shows good vocal abilities from Gene Ween.
Oh, true. Yeah.
There's a lot of range displayed that I think was a choice, was a choice to be made on a and on I Don't Want It to be choices that reflect the more current part of maybe himself when he was writing this album,
Hmm.
because maybe the concepts displayed in Tried and True and Transfer One and Argus are more purposefully conceptual,
Right.
and I Don't Want It and If You Could Save Yourself are more of personal anecdotes regarding change. I think the discrepancy is more of just the ways they were written in, which I think which I think maybe then that is what breaks it from being a concept album, is that I think it's very knowingly driving a wedge between the two types of songs it wants to make. Even three, I think the sarcastic songs are their own league, like So Many People and Mr. Fancy Pants. I think that's another section of songs. I think they
It's true.
definitely like they chose these were choices they made.
The sarcastic elements I'm going to choose to ignore. But despite the sarcastic elements, I do think that having both the materialistic and the more spiritual side in this album, I think is actually a good creative choice that really makes this album more human. Because, like for myself, for example, I'm somebody who loves music. I'm somebody who loves like these grander concepts, like you know the universe and looking at these things that are bigger than myself and recognize myself as part of them and learning as much about them as I can. But then at the end of the day, I still have to go, pay my bills and have very, you know, rather, I guess, meaningless interactions with people, like interactions
More
you would see
mundane.
in so many people in the neighborhood. Exactly, more mundane. And so I think I can see the reason for including these is it definitely makes the album more human, you know, because as much as ideally we would all love to be, these like truly the best spiritual form of ourselves, it's just not something you can do because we really are all human and we have these human experiences like love or like the societal construct of love and going through these bad things and using a medication like Zoloft to mask parts of yourself or having to have interactions like those seen in so many people in the neighborhood. So I can see why some of these songs are being included, you know.
Yeah, and I think most tellingly, maybe as a juxtaposition to each other in the track listing, are the Argus and If You Could Save Yourself, because I think the narrative and If You Could Save Yourself is just a more human expression on wanting to change, and the Argus is an innately mythical presentation of the story. Because the
Hmm.
Argus, the narrator in the Argus is interacting with this creature with a bunch of eyes. And If You Could Save Yourself seems to be more of a narrative of just a divorce that just comes to you one day, and you get stuck with lines, if you could save yourself, you could save us all. I think that line is not something seen in the Argus.
No,
The nature of
no.
that line.
Yeah.
That line is something that is being told to you by another human being who maybe feels the same things as seen in the Argus, but they're just another human being.
Right.
They
Exactly.
can't
Yeah.
they can't use the mythical language in a conversation about a divorce.
Right.
And that doesn't make the Argus any less positive of a song. I think it more so makes, if you could save yourself, a more realistic song. And I think that's the beautiful contrast of Quebec. Is that these
Right.
two contrasts I think work well together when typically I think it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. It, like I said, a very unique album, and I think after having talked about the album a little more, I definitely have some new opinions on it. I think that's interesting too because I've listened to this album a decent number of times. I don't listen to the songs in here very often, but I've probably listened to it 7 or 8 times now, just because I've tried to get into it. Um, and then I listened to it 3 times in preparation for this, and it seems like I'm still constantly learning about the album. So it is interesting, and I do get the hype behind it, and I enjoy the spiritual aspect of the music, of what's being covered. I think it's very interesting, and I can relate to it, I think.
And then I think that is also a success of the album to, I think, definitely create good conversation because it can definitely be seen as polarizing. But I think a good host of people can listen to it and come out with something that they enjoyed from it. At least something.
Definitely. Yeah. So where would you rate the album, I think? Out of a Is it a 5 out of 5?
To me, the only faults of this album are the fuck jam. I think to me, that's maybe the one
Yeah.
decision that I cannot defend. So regardless of the fuck jam, which would maybe for most bring it to like a 4 or 4.5, I think this album is a 5. Because to me, the uniqueness of the way it describes what it does is so very special. Because I think this band hit me at a unique time in my life and gave me nothing but positives, even if the songs display a level of either serendipity or sarcasm. It doesn't really matter because the nature in which these guys are making music, I see, is being purely sincere. I think
Yeah,
it's a
it's
very effective
definitely
piece of it's an effective piece of work for a band, as it was their it's the penultimate album, and they have like 10 of them. I think this is a pretty big feat for a band like Ween to make. So
sure.
in that sense, that's like my reasonings for giving it a 5. It's very all encompassing.
I would agree with it being very sincere. And yeah, I do think that that is a unique aspect of this album. Is there Yeah, there's not really any point where, even though there's like some creative decisions that I think I personally would not have made, uh because some of these songs are in here, I do see this as being a very sincere album. And you know, it wasn't necessarily created solely for the enjoyment of people, and I think that's why people enjoy it so much, is it was created with humans in mind, but I don't think it was solely created for somebody, you know. It was created with I think it was really created with the human experience in mind, which I think is very interesting. But with there being elements on this album that I think not everybody enjoys, like the fuck jam. I think you would be hard pressed to find somebody who really enjoys the fuck jam on this album. I think that having some of these creative decisions in here makes it uh, an album so unique that I don't think you would ever find an album like this outside of Ween's discography.
And to me, that's a marker. That's a marker of something in my grander musical tastes. Because
Right.
I'm always told, anytime I talk to Ween about anyone, they're always like, I've never seen someone so serious about something I find so silly. And I think that's very fair. It's a very fair thing to say. Because it just is one of those things that requires delving more into it to get a proper idea of the goal in mind. And in media, that's most definitely hard to come by, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I think will always be something. I think special to me, the notion of a special band is special because it's just what you make of it. It's just what you make of it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, very, very beautiful album. I'm gonna have to think on this one a little more because I hadn't thought about those connections before we started talking about it, like connections between Alkenrode and Transcendental Celebration. But yeah, I think it's interesting to be walking away from this and having new opinions, and that could just be because I'm not as educated on Ween as I have been on some of the other bands that we've talked about. I mean, you yourself called me a poser earlier. Um,
That language was a choice. I mean, I think it
um,
was accurate in the description. But now, after this discussion, that notion I feel like even within yourself has is dissipated a little because you just know more now.
right.
So
I
I think
guess
the
I've been
nature,
educated on the ways of Ween.
yes, and then I think that speaks to the grander nature of being a poser, being typically a bridge of education on a subject.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
once we learn more, we do tend to see it through our own feelings then, because it becomes a part of us now and how we're exchanging that information.
Yeah, it's a lesson mark of ignorance, I think. I really, that's all being a poser is. It's just how ignorant you are to a subject. You can't really be a poser if you actually know a lot about the band that you listen to, you know?
Exactly, and I think the notion of Ween having posers is very interesting to me because I don't know who would think you're cool for pointing out some
This
you're
is
putting one
purely
of
a
these
Gen
songs on
Z
the
thing.
aux.
Yes,
I think that
exactly.
notion is special about the Gen Z nature of the Ween revival that I think I'm seeing at the moment. Our culture's giving its twist on this one, on this band,
Right.
which I think, in fan base wise, I think this one does a lot better than maybe a band like Tool in adopting newer frameworks on how the history of the band is felt. As this
Yeah.
is as this is the middle of the meal and disagreements are expected. They are expected.
Well,
Potentially one could
we
think
look
we're
forward to
clueless.
them. Or yeah, Clueless. Gosh, I mean, we need to have a whole podcast just on some of these comments that we've received. Um, but that, I mean, that'll be for a later time, certainly. And that time will come because we've received many comments, and I think some people need a lesson in like how to like we are real people. I just want to point that out. And like
Correct.
I don't know if anybody some of our podcasts do actually get views. So I don't know if anybody watches the here, but I am responding to these comments. Like, and I'm a real
And if you
person.
are here in this part of the video, you are heavily appreciated because it's just of the nature of it. We're definitely way more understood when you watched an hour of us go on of just truly explaining, I think, what kind of people we are to come to these conclusions in the first place. That maybe gets missed in a clip.
No, definitely. But I have really enjoyed. I guess since we're on the fifth episode, conclusion of the fifth episode, I have really enjoyed doing this, and it's been interesting talking to some people who have agreed with us initially and kind of their own view on something or disagreed with us, and then, when we talk about it a little more, they can offer helpful insight as opposed to just being mean to us. And it's been fun reading the mean comments as well. So I so far have enjoyed this venture, and I think there's definitely much more to come.
As this is the middle of the meal with the worm,
And the sandwich.
and we'll see you guys next time for episode 6.